The shortest days of the entire year, weather that is brutally cold and oftentimes filled with snow and ice, and a landscape that is almost totally dormant. This is not an ideal time for gardeners. In fact, it's probably our least favorite time of year. However, what if I told you that there are several plants that flower during the winter that can provide an ornamental interest to your garden? In this video, we literally bear the snow and the ice to bring you 8 flowers that you can have during the winter for your landscape. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and you're watching The Plant Doctor. Let's get started. Even in 19-degree weather, and it's snowing right now, this plant's putting on a show. This is Chaenomeles speciosa, the flowering quince. So there's several species within the genus of Chaenomeles, and they're all native to Southeast Asia. USDA zones 4 through 9 on Chaenomeles speciosa. In terms of size, they're going to get 3 to 9 feet tall. This one's pretty much mature. It is a deciduous shrub. Flower colors, red, whites, pinks for the most part. You'll see some off-white apricot type colors, but for the most part, you're going to see reds, pinks, and white. Prefers part sun to full shade, and this one here is receiving part sun. It's getting some shade in the morning, and then the sun gets behind us here in the afternoon, and it gets full sun during the afternoon hours. One thing that I would warn you about with quince is that it does have thorns. So whenever pruning quince, we always want to prune quince after it flowers. You may want to wear gloves to avoid these thorns that you see here. This is Jasminum nudiflorum, winter honeysuckle. USDA zones 6 through 9, and it prefers part sun to full sun, so it can survive that 4 to 8 hour window, and it can also survive 8+ hours. Here in this location, it's getting part sun, it's shaded in the morning, and then it gets sun in the afternoon. It can survive in full shade, but you're not going to get the flower production that you otherwise would in a more sunny location. This plant is native to China and is actually a member of the olive family. It can grow up to 6 feet tall and also that wide, but it has more of a weeping habit, not to be confused with Carolina jasmine, which looks very similar, but Carolina jasmine will grow more upright, getting 12, 15 feet tall, and Carolina jasmine is an evergreen, while this plant is deciduous. If you have an area in your landscape where you're dealing with a lot of erosion issues, this is a plant to consider. It's excellent at erosion control. It's also drought tolerant and is also disease and pest resistant. It's one of the few plants that I think you can stick in the ground, water it for the first year to get established, and then leave it alone. It's going to be just fine. I have the ability to transmit audio to you, to transmit video to you. I wish there was a way to transmit fragrance from this plant through the camera to your viewing platform, because this smells incredible. This is Edgeworthia crysantha, USDA zones 7 through 10. So if you're in a more northern climate, this will not be ideal for you. However, if you were to draw a line like North Carolina, Kentucky south, all the way down to the Gulf Coast, if you're watching in the United States, this plant's ideal for you. This plant is native to China, grows 4 to 6 feet tall, and does good in part shade. I've seen some planted in full sun, and in the middle of summer, the edges of the leaves may get a little burned back. A pro tip for planting Edgeworthia, they do seem to like more moist soils. So if you live in an area that has really sandy soils like I do here, you may need to backfill your hole with something that has some moisture retention, something like potting mix with a lot of peat. Incorporate that into the soil and make sure that you're watering 2 to 3 times a week during the middle of the summer, because this is not a drought tolerant plant. Most of the time they're shrubs. This one's been tree formed, so our friends at Petals from the Past, that's where this plant came from. You can see the bud scars here where they've taken off the leaves off the bottom. Deciduous shrub, obviously, it's going to leaf out once it flowers, but the fragrance here is just incredible. Check this out if you don't know about it. It's a great plant. Perhaps my favorite evergreen flowering shrub for winter is this one here behind me. This is Camellia japonica. This is actually the state flower from the state I'm from, Alabama. I don't understand why it's our state flower, because it's native to Japan. You'll have to ask our politicians in their infinite wisdom why they didn't consult a horticulturalist about that. But I get off my soapbox. Beautiful shrub. thousands of cultivars. We're going to focus on two different types of Camellia here. This is Camellia japonica. There's another popular one, Camellia sasanqua. We're going to talk about both of them. Awesome flower colors, red, white, pink. You can have red flowers with flecks of white and white flowers with flecks of red and any combination in between. USDA zone 6 through 9, they like the same conditions that azaleas do. They like acidic soils, they like parched sun. So if you have a pH of like 5, they're going to love it. If you can give them like 4 or 6 hours of sunlight a day, and then in particular give them afternoon shade, they're going to love you for it. Height on camellias, this one behind me is pretty much mature, 6 to 12 feet tall. I have seen taller specimens in very ideal conditions. For example, North Florida, South Alabama, in very sandy soils with acidic pHs. I have seen some reach the 20-foot tall range. Very impressive specimens, but those are rare to see. Camellia japonica is going to start blooming around Christmas time, so I want you to think mid-December and continue to bloom into February. The other one we're going to look at blooms a little bit earlier. Let's go take a look. This is the smaller cousin of Camellia japonica. This is Camellia sasanqua, also native to Asia. It's going to be a little bit smaller. I want you to think 3 to 6 foot tall, depending on cultivar. We still have those same flower characteristics in terms of color, so whites, reds, pinks in particular. Going to bloom a little bit earlier. So this one blooms around Thanksgiving. So I want you to think mid-November going into Christmas time. And that's the main reason I have these two planted right beside each other. So we're getting a flower show in this area where we normally wouldn't have any flowers at all. So we go into November, everything's going dormant. These provide a show from mid-November till around Christmas. We get past Christmas, the flowers here fade off, but the Camellia japonicas behind them start to put on their show. By the time the camellias quit blooming, we're talking mid-February, we start to get into other things like Forsythia and deciduous magnolias, saucer magnolias, star magnolia that start to bloom. And then the plant palette really opens up. So if you're looking for a shrub combination to get you through those dull winter months and you're in the right climate location, I want you to consider Camellia sasanqua and Camellia japonica. Perhaps one of the most popular plants that bloom in late winter are daffodils. From the genus Narcissus, they're actually a member of the amaryllis family. So these grow from bulbs and they are perennial. They come back year after year. USDA zones 3 through 8. The more sun they get, the better. So full sun, you'll get nice full plants like this. Those that are grown in shade, they will survive in shade. However, you're not going to get the prolific flowers like you see here. A tip for growing Narcissus or daffodils. I see a lot of homeowners making the mistake of pruning them immediately after they flower. And then next year they don't get flowers and wonder why. Well, they're not letting the leaves serve their purpose. What I want you to do is this. Let the leaves stay up until they turn brown about halfway down the stalk. So what you'll see as you advance into spring, the tips will turn brown, and about a quarter of the way down they'll be brown. The brown will slowly move down each leaf blade. Once you get about halfway down with brown, then go ahead and prune. What's happening is this. The sugars, the energy that are going to produce these flowers for next year are being produced this spring. So all that photosynthetic activity going on in the leaf, those sugars are being stored in the bulb down below. And then next spring, that's what brings out the new foliage and the new flowers. So don't prune your narcissus, your daffodils, too early. This tree to my right is star magnolia, Magnolia stellata, native to Japan, USDA zones 5 through 8 on Magnolia stellata. This is a mature example. They normally get around 15 feet tall, and this one's right at about 15 feet tall. Oftentimes we think of magnolias as being evergreen trees, but obviously this is a deciduous tree. So we have saucer magnolias and star magnolias that are deciduous. They're going to flower, and then once they flower, they'll leaf out. Magnolia stellata does not like to have wet feet, so if you can give it an elevated spot on top of a hill or some soils that are very well drained and slightly acidic, so pH of 6 or 5.5, somewhere in that range, they'll do much better for you. I debated putting this shrub on because to me winter flowers should symbolize plants that flower between, we'll say, Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day. And here in my area, zone 8A, this one's right on the cusp. In warmer winters, this would have already bloomed. In winters like we're having this year, it's going to bloom a little bit later. So today is February the 20th, and this one is budded up heavily, but has not yet bloomed. This is Forsythia x intermedia. This is the flowering Forsythia. If you're not familiar with Forsythia, when this blooms, there'll be so many yellow flowers on it that you can't even see the stems. And this one's budded up really heavily. We're getting out of a really bad cold snap right now, and next week we're jumping up almost to 70 degrees. This plant will bloom next week. In terms of sun requirements, full sun to part shade. So these get morning sun. This brick wall off to my right shades it in the morning. Around lunchtime, the sun gets behind me here and then sets off my left-hand shoulder. They're drought tolerant once established. You don't have to come out and water them all the time. A great all-around shrub that does not have to be babied. We're not worried about a whole lot of disease. We're not worried about a whole lot of pest with Forsythia. USDA zones 4 through 9 on Forsythia. There are some cultivars or varieties that have been bred that do pretty well up into zone 3, but even then, I would think with a harsh winter, you're really pushing the limits of Forsythia. I hope this video has helped you identify some winter flowering plants that will bring interest to your landscape when there's not a whole lot going on. If you have plants that we did not go over in this video that you would like to share with the audience, please leave a comment down below and share those plant species with us. Guys, I'm going in. I'm freezing. As always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor. Until next time, happy gardening.